Have you ever thought about what happens if a test result goes sideways and what the consequences are? Well, you, my friend, are doing a test premortem. Welcome to the Treachery of Data podcast, the companion podcast for the CRO Roundtable, bite-sized chunk of content summarizing what was discussed at the roundtable last week. All right, so yeah, you are pretty much the premortem expert here. Oh, no, not
Not
really?
really.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's something that's I don't seemingly comes up with enough frequency where I thought this would be a good thing to cover.
Mhm. I was actually doing these premortems a lot without knowing that they were premortems. And it was actually when I was speaking to Craig in one of the roundtables, he was saying, what are you doing is a premortem. And it's like, oh, okay. So that's where the term kind of came from. Um,
Well, at least in use in CRO, right? Or at least in
yes.
your work, right? Premortem as a term has existed long before CRO. It's not a
Yeah.
CRO specific thing. But to establish a baseline, let's at least define what a premortem is.
Yeah. So imagine you have a failure on your website, a failure with a test. And most likely you'd conduct a post-mortem, like, oh, what went wrong here? And then you figure out what went wrong and you put some actions in to cover for the next time a failure like that could happen. Well, a pre-mortem is preempting all of that, and you do a what if scenario based on some outcomes, and then you actually put those outcomes back into the test. So let's imagine highlight some scenarios. The first thing is failed experiments. Like there's this thing that a lot of people often mention. No experiment is truly a failure. You have at least learned something, but that's assuming that you've actually learned something, because if you haven't put in the necessary metrics to the test, you may not have learned anything from a test loss. So,
Yeah, so you're specifically defining like failure as an error state of the experiment. Like something actually went wrong with the execution of the experiment. It's not failure in the sense of like, oh, the variation didn't outperform the control.
it's that, and also that. So
Oh, oh,
it's
both.
basically both and
Mm.
everything. So imagine you've got a test which is like font sizes. So you increase the font size, and then you see the test is a win. But then you kind of like figure, oh, is the test a win because or let's assume the test is a loss actually, because that's probably a more important scenario. If the test is a loss, you might consider like, oh, what went wrong here? Why would the test be a loss when we just shifted the pixel by one pixel? Um, and you might have some various hypotheses as to why. Um, it could be because some layout has changed on a specific page, but you weren't tracking any of that. So you actually haven't learned with enough granularity to then take on actions to the next step. So,
Mhm.
so what you'd have to do at that point is to pretty much assume that perhaps it's this and move ahead, or maybe run the test again with those metrics in there. So a pre-mortem is kind of like trying to preempt all of those scenarios where where you may have either failed in terms of the test itself had an error, or failed in terms of failed to gather any sort of insight from the test because of the lack of secondary or test specific metrics.
Now, a premortem's not specifically only for failure state though, right? Essentially it's being proactive about uh, th theorizing, like, what are your potential courses of action given potential outcomes of an experiment? Like, "Hey, if the variation doesn't perform better than the control, what are we going to do as a consequence of that?
Yeah.
What are we going to do as a result of all of the different potential result states of this experiment? That in summary, that's really what a premortem is, right?
Yeah.
So it's not specifically limited to only a failure or an error or a loss state, because you can also pre-plan what's going to happen if the test is inclusive or if the test is a success
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, because if the test is a success and then the outcome action is, well, we can never really put that live anyway. So then it's kind of like, well, why did we why did we run this test in the first place? So it kind of preempts, even successful tests, and flat tests as well. Flat tests especially, because flat tests especially, like you've not you just stand the chance of just going, well, what happened there, we don't know. It was probably inconclusive, whatever. So we haven't learned with enough granularity whether or not it was a loss or a win. But in that gray area where it's kind of like, well, we don't know anything, sort of thing. So it covers all of those kind of scenarios, as well as
W-
the error state of the
Yeah.
test.
What is your follow-up from the information that you're going to learn as a
Yeah.
result of this test,
And it probably makes sense if you kind of go through like the steps of doing one and how
Mhm.
how it works, and that you probably get a better understanding of what it actually is. So, um, like the first thing is what you're really effectively doing is you kind of like crystal balling it, kind of going, okay, what could happen with this test? And the good news is when you run an A/B test, you already know what the outcomes could be. It's either a win, loss, inconclusive, or there was some kind of data error or something.
Given how you run your experimentation program, you should have some sort of, like, end state of experiments, right? Which
Yeah,
that you
exactly.
know, that's easily a whole other potential topic, but
Mm. Yeah, exactly. That's probably something to note down. But yeah, given those outcomes, and there's four specific outcomes you could have. You could just like go through and brainstorm the because. So it was a win. Why was it a win? Is it because this feature is more prominent? Is it because this got pushed up the page or something like that? It's a loss. Why was it a loss? Because this feature got pushed, or this section got pushed down the page. This thing was more prominent and therefore unbalancing the UI. It had no impact whatsoever. Yeah, because maybe it was conflicting with some other kind of messaging on the same area, or it was an error. It was an error because we're using perhaps it's a redirect test or some other test where we kind of go, well, the counting is possibly off, or we're probably gonna we this test, because it's so complex, we stand to get like more people into um you start to see sample ratio issues with more people returning into the variation than with the control or something like that. So there's loads of different situations where you could get an invalid test because of some sort of data issues. So so you know what these. So you basically brainstorm all of these because, and then you go on to the next step, which is kind of go, okay, if we list down all of the because statements, um, decide on what the metrics are going to be. One of the because actually, that's a really important one is, and for this you might want to get like your hippos in, because one thing that I see time and time again is kind of like if there's a test evangelist, an evangelist for that specific test, like a champion for that test, they came up with the idea, etc. If the test was a loss or inconclusive, they would have a whole list of reasons possibly why that didn't work, because they'd be perhaps invested in seeing it win. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just like a human nature thing, right? Um, So in that scenario, it's best to ask them, okay, say the test was a loss, why would it be a loss? And try to sort of like work backwards from there instead of seeing the results and then them going, well, it's obviously because of this and because of that, and kind of not really accepting the the test at all. And same with the hippos. There's a feature that's really, really important that they need to go out with, and they would be really invested in seeing that feature succeed. So, maybe they'd say, yeah, it lost, but visits probably increased or blah 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 blah, all that kind of stuff. So so yeah, and that's in a nutshell how you do and how you do one, and what you get at the end of it is a bunch of metrics like how do you measure the becauses. So you got a list of because this, because that. How do you determine which one of those is correct? And then you can make sure that you've got the right metrics, the right sort of test design, etc. To to make sure you're maximizing your learnings.
Yeah. The premortem is an important test, or not an important test, excuse me, an important aspect of the test planning phase because it helps inform the viability of the test from the standpoint of, you know, you're saying like, well, if the test is inconclusive or it loses, and someone's saying, well, we're going to do it anyway,
Mm,
then don't waste your time running don't waste your time running the test. You know, it it informs the goals that you're going to add to the experiment because you're trying to think of what if this thing happens? Like you're trying to pre-build your list of unintended consequences
mm,
so you can track and monitor them. Like that's how you fill out your secondary and guardrail metric list
yeah,
for the tests.
yeah. Yeah, and to go even further, like once you've got a list of these metrics, you decide which ones you want to prioritize, which ones, because a lot of the time you'd see, what I've seen uh, where the product owners and the teams are kind of like, well, we've got that tracked already in Google Analytics or in Adobe or wherever. Um, but yes, they do. But how easy is it to get to those metrics? Like,
How easy is it to look at that data within the context of users placed into a variation?
yeah,
Because
and
sure, you could look at the totality easy enough, but you need to look at that segmented by how was that metric affected by the different variations. Like, you know the control state because that's how the site currently operates, but you need to know how that metric how well, if and how that metric changes as a result of the variation.
yeah,
And you can either build tracking into your testing tool for that. You can explicitly set up a goal to track it, or you can set up data pipeline for feeding test and variation ID data into your analytics system so that it can be used for segmentation, which that's a fairly easy thing to do and you should be doing anyway.
mm. And oftentimes it's um, you're weighing up the cost of doing it one way versus another way. So
Mhm.
the cost of the analyst to review after the fact, if this if it's only in your Adobe or your GA or wherever, and they have to segment via the test IDs and stuff like that, and do the analysis and then run the statistics externally
Mhm.
versus actually the upfront cost of building those metrics into the testing tool, if the testing tool supports it. So then you've got it visualized in a dashboard during runtime. So how often might you want to get
There's an effort
those?
cost
Yeah,
trade-off
there's an
there.
effort and trade-off cost. So, and also, it might be, well, the cost of building this metric is so expensive. We might as it's actually better for us to do a follow-up test, or cheaper for us to do a follow-up test rather than put in all of that effort into building out those metrics in the first place. So yeah, there is a trade off for all of those kind of metrics that you got as a list.
Yeah, let's do like a hypothetical example
Mhm.
of a test and like potential premortem consequences.
Yeah.
So one thing you mentioned earlier was like changing font size on a website. Like maybe you want to, you think that your demographic actually skews a little bit older, so maybe you want to bump the font size up a point or two. It's already at like maybe 15 or 16 or something, which is already a pretty decent font size. Maybe you want to bump it up even bigger because like your site audience is over, whatever the age is where people generally start to wear glasses and need, prescriptions and things like that. Um, Bumping up font size is going to make the page taller because text is going to take up more space. Now, that may not be as big a deal on the desktop environment because it's a really wide screen and everything, but hey, if your site's responsive on a mobile phone, if the font size also increases on the mobile phone, that may potentially double page length or more, you know. Um, and then if you're thinking about it, like, okay, that makes it a lot easier to consume the content and maybe helps with the primary conversion activity that you're running. But potentially there's an unintended consequence there of like, maybe there's like an upsell block that's after the main paragraph content, that's halfway down the page or something like that. And now that the page is so much taller, significantly less users are being exposed to that piece of content, that upsell block, which was actually a really good, abandoned capture or something like that, right?
Yes. So, but yeah, exactly. So and the what you do in that scenario is like, first of all, you mentioned the demographics. So you might want to check, okay, so shifting the pixels up, maybe if we see an increase in conversion, like the conversion rate increases, is it because of your demographic that you thought that be driving it? So maybe you'd want to run a segment of that demographic. So, above that specific age, below that specific age. So then maybe you'd want to see that in your dashboard. Maybe got that data in GA, or coming in, from, some other sort of in the data layer or something like that, and push that into your testing tool so you can have that as a nice segment to view. Or perhaps you want to make sure that, yeah, it's that how what device breakpoints are important for this test. So for at this specific device breakpoint, the sections now are visibly or noticeably longer. So then there is like this long scroll introduced. So what breakpoint is it that big impact happens? And maybe you'd want to make sure that you're tracking that also. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that just come out of the woodwork, like as you just mentioned, as you're kind of like going through the pre-mortem in your head sort of thing. Then you kind of yeah, you just have all these scenarios
Yeah.
that are raised.
You're essentially you're trying to avoid solving one problem, but creating another problem,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
Which, if you were an unscrupulous experimentation practitioner, that you could just easily keep feeding yourself things, but at some point, right, you're just creating false illusory lift because, like the actual metrics aren't going up. Like they're just going up within the bounds of the experiment. You're not creating true lift with your experimentation program.
Yeah, and also you might be running more tests than you need to.
Yeah,
Right.
you're creating inefficiency.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have an interesting question here.
Mhm.
Would you consider statistical pre-planning as part of the premortem, or is that just nitpicking?
Ooh, interesting. So you mean like an NDE sort of situation?
Right, pre-planning your test runtime and everything using the statistical calculation because
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
you should still like that's an aspect of like evaluating a test for viability. So
Yeah. In fact, that was a scenario that I had. I remember going back. So we had a scenario where we were going to run a test, but then we knew we had to make a decision on that test pretty quick. So we had like a very limited time window to run all these testing before we could decide like we need to ship this feature.
you need an answer on this in like the next 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, or it wasn't specifically 2 weeks, but yeah, as an example.
Just as a yeah.
So in that scenario, actually, it was a case of like had to do some heavy pre-morteming in terms of like figuring out, okay, what happens if this happens? Is it because of this, because of that? And it ended up adding, I think it was like 30 to 40 metrics to the test. Now, normally you wouldn't add that many metrics, but this was a case where you had to learn quick. So we had two iterations of the test that we could possibly do. At the end of the first iteration, we had to decide like pretty quick that we needed to end the test, create a new iteration, and then go with the new iteration in order to learn as much as possible within the time window that we had. Um, and in that instance, it did actually help because all of those metrics, not all of them were useful, and we had to build those metrics into the test itself because we didn't have time for an analyst to analyze it after the fact, so they needed to be built into the test framework.
Yeah.
So we knew we'd have a scenario where we would have to, as a team, or that specific product team, would have to analyze the tests themselves without an analyst support. So which meant seeing the results in the testing tool itself. So yeah, and knowing what what significance levels you would be looking at potentially, like going back to your significance and statistical sort of question. So you'd then do the pre-mortem to say we'd only really consider this to be an impact if it was more than this percent and the results were XXX, whatever. Otherwise, we probably want to run it longer or what. So you'd start
Predefining your success
predefining,
criteria as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
a success or failure criteria.
Yeah, doing a premortem is a way to combat like a wait and see approach, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
we'll let the test run. Oh, these look good, but they're not convincing. We just need to let the test run another week and stuff. Which, depending on your statistical evaluation method, if you're using Bayesian, you don't have a prior to deal with, so you can't, that allows for some more variability in a wait and see approach. But you're still, constrained by realities of like when does a decision need to be made by for information to be useful and things like that. In fact, I was just talking with a client where they had a test result and they were kind of uncertain about it because it was a test that they were running to see if they should expend more resources into producing some content, right? And there was a lot of stakeholders involved here because they really, really, really wanted to, pursue that content creation avenue. But the test results were saying like, no, this isn't like if you add this to the site, it would be bad. Um, and she's like, well, how, uh, how do we like poke holes in this, or like how do we get back and say this? And I was looking at the results. Well, the test had run for like 6 months, and it was like my first thing was like, oh, that probably ran for way too long. And looking at the scenario, it was like, well, it had to run that long to get an appropriate sample size and stuff. And it's like, well, if you'd run a premortem, you like kind of like if you were more stringent about that, it kind of would have
Yeah.
been more like that was probably actually a non-viable test.
Yeah.
And so, if that's something that you really want to make a decision about, you either have to pursue different avenues than doing it as an A/B test, or you'd need to like do some executional thing to increase exposure so that you could have enough sample size to run it in a much more like reasonable time frame.
Yeah, and that 6 month is an incredible sort of investment in time that you're
Mhm.
putting into the test. So, yeah, so if say, I'm not saying that you should run 6 month long tests, but say you get to the end of the 6 months and you kind of go, oh, so what did we learn? Oh, we forgot these metrics. Oh no, that's like 6 months down the
Yeah,
drain.
yeah.
So, yeah, it is. It's the pre-mortems are probably more important for the more important tests. So, and a lot of tests you could probably just do it in your head.
Yeah, you don't have to do it for literally every single test because you need to balance
Yeah,
velocity and execution,
yeah,
right?
and
Like
also,
if you're doing a really robust pre-mortem for every single test, that's gonna um, slow your velocity down too much. Yeah, you don't need to do you probably don't need to do a pre-mortem on like say a headline change. If and I'm being hypothetical here, where it's like that's a more straightforward, concrete. Think about and this could also be another subject is like classifying your tests on a like on some sort of spectrum, impact spectrum, where it's like this is an iterative or a small scale test where it's like, maybe it's lower risk, straightforward, something, like versus like, hey, this is a big disruptive like we're gonna test adding a new feature or completely rearranging, the page design or something like that, where there's much more things that are likely to have, to go wrong or sideways or have unintended effects. Like that's the thing. That's something that rises to the level of importance of like you should be doing a pre-mortem on this.
yeah. And we as CRO practitioners and experimentation practitioners should get used to doing them in our heads as we go along, so as well. So even for the tests that are really simple to run, yes, we don't need to set up some specific
That's a
meeting and
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be a formal thing to do for every experiment, but you as the strategist or person executing on experiments, like running a pre-mortem is just a thought process that
yeah,
you should inherently be incorporating into how you're thinking about.
yeah. Yeah, an additional one actually is kind of like looking at and this is especially true for some of the price tests that we run is kind of like thinking, okay, what is the worst case scenario for this pricing test? And yeah, if the worst case scenario is legal issues, so then you'd want to you want to try and combat that, right? Like you'd want to speak to the legal team, sort of say, what if this happened with this test? And they could go, holy shit, do you think that could really happen? Say, what if this did happen? So then you'd have that conversation up front, and you'd maybe put in some additional copy or make some changes or do something to mitigate that risk, um, and or you maybe decide not to run the test because of the sheer risk involved. But yeah, it's kind of like also going through looking at it from beyond even the win loss fail error to sort of and then legal issues arise, sort of thing. So depending on the test, you'd probably want to factor those in. So for price level tests, I always have that as an additional outcome as well. So
Yeah, caring attention to, again, thinking through consequences of results and miti preemptively trying to mitigate adverse effects as best you can, either through tracking additional analytics to guardrail against things going wrong, or explicitly in the experiment design itself. Like the design needs to be changed in some way to mitigate those issues. Like in your example, like maybe there's explicit language or copy that the legal team provides that you have to, like add as a disclaimer or something underneath the price point to say, like price is subject to change, or some other kind of like CYA type language. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't
mm.
know how it would actually be crafted, but that's why you would involve the legal team. They would be the expert.
And actually, and this is probably a separate discussion as well. This is why I'm really keen to always involve the legal team in in the testing efforts. Like if it's a large company, you're overlaying experiments, you're running at a high velocity of experiments. Just running the experiments by the legal team is a really good idea because their mindset is already on the preemptive mode because they're so used to writing contracts and legal contracts and stuff like that, which is all pretty much pre-morteming a particular outcome. So say you're doing a work for hire contract, they'd be going through, well, what if this happens? We probably want to add a clause for that, et cetera, et
The
cetera.
legal team's entire job is proactive evaluation of
Yeah.
consequences.
Exactly. So I've found them to be a great source of inspiration, and I found that they don't actually slow down the testing at all. They just kind of like, well, have you considered what would happen if this were to happen, and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Not actually have them involved in terms of deciding the UI at detail, and they normally don't. In my experience, of get in there and kind of go, yeah, but have you tried this changing this and hypothesizing this or whatever. But it's much more about the
They
what
could be involved in that, but that's not within the context of the premortem. Like that's,
exactly.
like
That's something.
getting that's just general, getting organizational uh awareness of like ideation
Mm,
and yeah, sourcing.
yeah,
Yeah. But you do bring up a good point of like premortem is not a solo activity.
mm,
Just like, just like test QA is not a solo activity, right?
mm,
Like if you're the only person QAing your tests, well, how you have the curse of knowledge there and that you know how it was built, how it was done, and how it's supposed to work. So you may miss things of like, trying to interact with it in ways that, you didn't think about because you are not your audience. So you always have multiple people QA a test. Same thing with the premortem. Get other people involved. Like have them think about potential outcomes as well.
yeah, exactly. And I think the bigger your organization and the more people who are testing, the more important pre-mortems are, I would say. If you are, if you're a small website and you're running one test at a time and you're the only CRO, then yeah, sure, do in your head, you don't need to make a formal process out of it. But the bigger your organization, the more teams are running experiments. You want to make sure that those teams are running as efficiently as possible and thinking about metrics, even though they might not be analysts or analytical
Mhm.
in any way, but give them a process um, by which to get involved in the decision making process for deciding what metrics need to go into a test.
Yeah. Now there's a balance that needs to be struck there as well, though, because you don't want to involve literally everybody
Oh yeah,
in the
yeah, of
premortem
course.
process, right? You still have to have some segmentation of responsibility there, just like any kind of organizational responsibility, right? Like, you know, not everybody in the department is involved in every single activity, right? There's
Yeah,
specialization of roles. So, right, you depending on how your org is structured for experimentation, if you're using distributed center of excellence, et cetera, that's also going to inform how who's involved in your premortem process.
yeah. I used to previously in my previous company where I had to manage a large number of tests going out and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I just used to jot them down into a notebook. So I used to do them separately. So yes, you're right. Like it's if you've got a center of excellence, then maybe it's them that do it. But there'd be a case of each time you do it, you'll get better and faster at it. So then until it comes to a point where you pretty much almost like doing it in your head while you're having meetings or while you're going through a test design. Kind of go, okay, maybe want to make sure that we're thinking about this and thinking about that sort of things, but always thinking in that sort of getting into that mindset of that legal mindset of thinking about the consequences and working back, uh, and just getting practice at that mindset definitely does help in just to make yourself more efficient.
Yeah, as with anything,
Yeah.
uh, experimentation related, the more you execute on it, the more you'll uh, be able to get through it quicker. All right, good deal. Anything else that you wanted to cover for premortem stuff?
Nope, I think that covers it.
All right.
Um, but yeah, any questions from anyone about it, just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, if you've got any questions or feedback, you can always talk to me and Iqbal face to face at the CRO Roundtable every Friday. You can find us at conversionworld.co if you want to sign up and attend the roundtables. Free to join. Everybody's welcome. Open forum for discussing any CRO related stuff. If you've got a question you want to ask some experts, or if you have an interesting test result you'd like to review, anything's on the table. If you're shy and don't like speaking, you can always connect with us on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.